In this lesson, we're going to look at dividing fractions. So to understand dividing by fractions, it's best to look back at something we all understand, which is using whole numbers. So if we look at this, firstly, 6 divided by 2, then what we're really saying is how many 2's make up 6? Okay, well hopefully you say 3. 3 2's make up 6. So if we look at the fraction idea, a half divided by a quarter, we're really saying how many quarters make up a half. So hopefully we can agree that's a quarter circle. And I've now made a half circle. And how many quarters make up a half? Hopefully you can see here, there's 2. So that would be the answer to that. But that's quite an easy question to understand. Sometimes it's a bit more complicated. Something like this, can you imagine trying to think about that? How many 2/5 make up 3/8? Oh, that's too hard to think about. So we need a technique. Now in maths, techniques are usually about spotting patterns. So let's have a look at this idea. Let's try and spot a pattern with some easy examples and then apply that to more tricky examples. This is quite often the rules in maths that work for us. So let's think how many halves make up 10. Okay, well 2 halves make up a whole. So if you're trying to think of it in terms of pizzas or quiche or whatever it is you want to think about, how many halves do you need to make up 10 whole pizzas? Well, hopefully you can come to the conclusion you need 20 halves to make up 10 whole pizzas. Put 20 halves together, you can get 10 wholes. But a good way of thinking about that is, well, that's kind of the same as 10 times 2. And 2 can be written as 2 over 1. 2 over 1 is just 2, isn't it? Well, let's look at this one. How many thirds are in 9? So how many third pizzas we need to make up 9 pizzas? You need 3 to make a whole pizza, wouldn't you? In terms of 9 pizzas, that'd be 3 times 9. That'd be 27, wouldn't it? 3 to make a whole, and then 3 lots of 9 to make up to 9 pizzas. Okay, well, let's think about that. What are you doing with the 9 to get to 27? You're kind of just times them by 3. 3 over 1, if you like. And the last one here, how many quarters are in 3? Well, 4 quarters make up a whole. And you need 3 lots of that, 3 lots of those 4s, and that's 12. So essentially what you're doing is you're doing 3 times 4. But we can look at it this way, and we're kind of flipping the fraction over, aren't we? From 1 over 2 it's going to 2 over 1, from 1 over 3 it's going to 3 over 1, and we're actually timesing, and it gets us the same answer. So that's the rules kind of for dividing by fractions. It's the same as multiplying by the inverse. Now the inverse is a flipped version of the fraction. So the basic idea is you do the top over the bottom times the bottom over the top. We know how to multiply fractions. We've done it in the last lesson. It's much easier than division. So if we can turn it into a multiply, we can then handle this idea. So let's look at this first one. We've got 3 over 8 divided by 2/5. So the rules are you need to flip the fraction over and make it into a multiply. That's what we were doing here to make it easier. We're flipping the fraction over and turning it into a multiply, and it just made it much easier to think about. Let's do the same thing then. So we've got 3 over 8, turn it into a multiply, flip the fraction. It's really important to flip the fraction here. Now, it was the second fraction we were flipping. It was this one here. We didn't do it with the start. We flipped this one over. So that's the same idea. You just leave the 3 over 8 as it is. Now from the multiplying lesson, it was just 3 times 5 over 8 times 2. And that gives you 15 over 16. That's your answer. Obviously, if you need to simplify it, then try and do that. Right, let's look at the next one. 4 over 7 divided by 1 over 3. Well, let's turn it into a multiply to make it easier. 4 over 7 times 3 over 1. Top times top, bottom times bottom. So that leaves you 12 over 7. Now, I wouldn't leave it like that. That's called a top-heavy fraction or improper fraction. I would try and change it into a mixed number. So how many 7s are in 12? Well, 1 with 5 7s left over. And you can finish it like that. Okay, last one here, 3/4 divided by 5 over 6. Again, let's make it easier. Let's turn it into a multiply. flip the fraction over. The 6 becomes the top and the 5 becomes the bottom. Now you'll notice here I've highlighted the two diagonal numbers. That's because you can simplify at this stage. You don't need to, you could do it later, but if you watched the last lesson on multiplying fractions, then this is a good way to do it. So we can see they're both in the 2 times table. So let's divide them both by 2. So divide that by 2, you get 3. Divide that by 2, you get 2. And now the top times the top is 3 times this new 3, and 2 times 5 in the bottom, and you get 9 over 10.